Good evening. Welcome to my channel, where today's diplomatic collapse triggers tomorrow's exodus as multiple Western governments issue urgent warnings to their citizens. Leave Iran immediately while commercial flights still operate, because Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei just rejected President Donald Trump's ultimatum, declaring Iran will accept no deal that compromises sovereignty or uranium enrichment rights, effectively ending diplomatic path and activating military option that Trump has prepared through positioning B-2 Spirit stealth bombers at Diego Garcia ready to strike Iranian nuclear facilities within hours of presidential authorization that sources indicate could come as early as tonight or tomorrow morning. Leave Iran now means Western intelligence agencies assess strike is imminent, not hypothetical, with embassies coordinating emergency evacuations of diplomatic staff, advising private citizens to depart on any available commercial transportation before airspace closes and borders seal once American bombs begin falling on targets across Iranian territory from Tehran to Natanz to Isfahan to Qom, in campaign designed to comprehensively destroy nuclear program that Khamenei's no deal rejection has made inevitable through refusal to accept Trump's red lines requiring complete transparency, enrichment limits, missile restrictions, and proxy defunding. Trump ready to use Diego Garcia represents specific operational revelation, where mentioning this base by name signals B-2 bombers are loaded with 30,000-pound massive ordnance penetrator bunker buster bombs designed to destroy underground enrichment facilities. Iran has spent billions fortifying against exactly these strikes, with Diego Garcia providing 7,000-mile range, allowing bombers to reach Iranian targets without requiring regional allies' permission or support from bases that might politically refuse access once shooting starts. An Iranian retaliation begins hitting facilities across Middle East in response campaign. Iranian military has prepared through pre-positioning missiles, activating proxy forces, and coordinating with Russia-China, whose warnings about escalation have failed to deter Trump from proceeding with operation that defense officials describe as largest air campaign since 2003. Arak invasion designed to achieve in weeks what decades of sanctions and diplomacy failed to accomplish. Permanent elimination of Iranian nuclear threat through military force that destroys facilities, kills scientists, decimates Revolutionary Guard, and potentially triggers regime collapse that Trump administration hopes will follow once Iranian people see their government's defiance produce national catastrophe that sanctions and pressure alone could never have created. Let me explain why warning to leave Iran now is not routine travel advisory, but urgent evacuation order signaling imminent military action based on specific intelligence about Trump's decision timeline. Multiple Western governments, including United States, United Kingdom, Germany, France, and other NATO allies, have upgraded travel warnings from reconsider travel to leave immediately or do not travel under any circumstances, which represents highest threat level reserved for active war zones or imminent conflict scenarios where civilian safety cannot be guaranteed. These warnings specifically cite risk of military action and advise citizens that commercial flight availability may be limited and borders could close on short notice, which is diplomatic language for, we know strikes are coming and you need to leave before they begin because once they start, we cannot extract you safely. Embassy staff reductions where American diplomats have been ordered to depart Tehran, leaving only skeleton crew for emergency situations, proves U.S. government expects its own military action to trigger Iranian response, potentially targeting diplomatic facilities, making normal embassy operations impossible to sustain safely. And coordination across multiple allied governments issuing simultaneous warnings proves intelligence sharing has revealed specific Trump decision to proceed with strikes in immediate time frame measured in hours or days, not weeks. With allied capitals being notified to prepare for American military action, they will be expected to support politically, even if not participating operationally, creating unified Western posture that maximizes pressure on Iran while protecting citizens from becoming hostages or casualties when bombing begins. Khamenei saying no deal represents final rejection of Trump's ultimatum and diplomatic off-ramp that would have prevented military strikes if Iran accepted comprehensive agreement addressing nuclear program, ballistic missiles, and regional proxies. Khamenei's statement that Iran will accept no deal compromising sovereignty or enrichment rights directly contradicts Trump's red lines requiring Iran surrender, enrichment capability, submit to unlimited inspections, dismantle advanced centrifuges, ship out enriched uranium stockpiles, restrict missile development, and defund Hezbollah, Hamas, Houthis, and Iraqi militias that Iran uses as regional power projection tools. No deal on these terms means no deal at all because Trump has consistently stated these elements are non-negotiable requirements for any agreement lifting sanctions or normalizing relations. Khamenei's rejection is final because supreme leader has ultimate authority over Iranian strategic decisions, and his public statement closes door on negotiated solution that hardliners in Tehran opposed as humiliating surrender, and that Trump's team designed specifically to be comprehensive enough to prevent future Iranian cheating while demanding enough to be politically difficult for regime to accept without appearing defeated. This is diplomatic Kobayashi Maru, where Trump structured deal requirements knowing Iran would likely refuse, providing justification for military action he has prepared forces to conduct while demonstrating to international community and Congress that America tried peaceful resolution Iran's intransigence made impossible. Khamenei's no deal gives Trump exactly the pretext he needs to proceed with strikes, having established diplomatic record, showing Iran refused reasonable terms, attacked protesters, threatened neighbors, and accelerated nuclear program despite maximum pressure campaign designed to bring them to negotiating table they ultimately abandoned through their own choice. Trump ready to use Diego Garcia is operational signal, not political threat, because mentioning specific military base by name in context of Iran crisis reveals strike planning has progressed beyond contingency to actual execution preparation, where assets are positioned, weapons loaded, crews briefed, and only presidential go order remains before missions launch. Diego Garcia is British Indian Ocean territory hosting joint US-UK military facility, providing critical logistics hub and bomber base located approximately 2,500 miles from Iran, placing Tehran within comfortable range of B-2 Spirit stealth bombers that can fly 7,000-mile missions without refueling, while carrying up to 40,000 pounds of precision-guided munitions, including massive ordnance penetrators, specifically designed to destroy hardened underground facilities like Iranian Natanz and Fordow enrichment sites buried under hundreds of feet of reinforced concrete and earth that conventional bombs cannot penetrate. Using Diego Garcia provides multiple operational advantages that make it ideal platform for Iranian strikes compared to alternatives like regional bases or carrier-based aviation. First, Diego Garcia operations don't require host nation approval from nervous regional allies like Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar, or Kuwait, who might politically refuse basing access if they fear Iranian retaliation targeting their territories, giving Trump complete operational freedom to conduct strikes without diplomatic complications. Second, Diego Garcia's remote location, protected by thousands of miles of ocean, makes it immune to Iranian retaliation through missiles or proxies, unlike forward bases in Gulf that Iranian weapons can reach. Third, B-2 stealth bombers flying from Diego Garcia provide penetration capability that carrier-based fighters cannot match, using radar-absorbent materials and low observable design to evade Iranian air defenses that would detect and engage conventional aircraft. Fourth, bunker buster munitions required to destroy underground enrichment facilities are too heavy for carrier aircraft to carry effectively, requiring strategic bombers like B-2 that can deliver 30,000-pound massive ordnance penetrators with enough kinetic energy to penetrate hardened targets. And fifth, using Diego Garcia sends strategic message to Iran and international community that American strike capability is global and unstoppable, with bombers launching from Indian Ocean base, proving U.S. can reach any target anywhere, regardless of geography or defenses adversaries deploy. And Trump's decision to proceed despite Khamenei's rejection is driven by multiple converging factors that make military action appear inevitable regardless of diplomatic failure. First factor is Israeli pressure, where Prime Minister Netanyahu has coordinated closely with Trump on comprehensive campaign exceeding limited June 2025 strikes, with Israeli officials preparing for multi-front war scenario and pressing Trump to act decisively while window exists before Iran completes nuclear breakout or Russia-China complete integrated defense architecture protecting Iranian facilities. Second factor is intelligence assessments, showing Iran weeks away from having sufficient weapons-grade uranium for multiple nuclear devices, creating urgency where further delay allows problem Trump vowed to prevent during campaign to materialize, making him appear weak or ineffective to domestic supporters who expected decisive action. Third factor is oil market conditions, where current prices around $70 to $80 per barrel with adequate global supplies create strategic window where oil shock from Hormuz disruption would be painful but manageable compared to striking during tight market when prices already elevated would spike to economically catastrophic levels. Fourth factor is perceived Iranian regime weakness after January protests killed thousands, and American-Israeli strikes last year damaged military capabilities, making current moment potentially optimal for external pressure, triggering internal collapse that restores deterrence value of American military power. Fifth factor is Trump's personal psychology favoring decisive action over extended deliberation, with president's instinct being to use overwhelming force quickly rather than gradual escalation that allows adversary time to prepare and potentially complicate American operations through fortification or alliance coordination. And sixth factor is political calculation, that military action before midterm elections demonstrates strength-projecting image of resolute commander protecting American interests despite complex geopolitical constraints that critics might use to argue for restraint or continued diplomatic engagement. But proceeding with strikes activates the nightmare scenarios that analysts and allied governments have warned produce consequences exceeding benefits of destroying Iranian nuclear facilities. Iran has explicitly threatened to close Strait of Hormuz through mining, missile attacks on tankers, and swarm boat harassment, making transit impossible for commercial shipping that carries 20% of globally traded oil, creating supply disruption that drives prices to $150 or higher, triggering global recession as transportation and manufacturing costs spike beyond consumers' ability to absorb. Iran has pre-positioned missiles and activated proxy forces across region, ready to conduct simultaneous attacks on American bases in Iraq, Syria, Qatar, and Bahrain, plus strikes on Israeli cities, Saudi oil facilities, and UAE infrastructure, creating multi-front crisis that overwhelms American and allied defensive capabilities through saturation, where some Iranian strikes inevitably succeed, despite Arrow, THAAD, and Patriot systems intercepting majority of incoming weapons. Russia and China have warned strikes spark wider confrontation and provided Iran with S-400 air defense systems operated by Russian personnel plus intelligence sharing, creating engagement scenarios where American bombers face more capable defenses than planners anticipated, potentially resulting in shootdowns and casualties that transform limited operation into sustained campaign, requiring escalation Trump hoped to avoid. Iranian cyber capabilities, enhanced through Russian-Chinese cooperation, can target American homeland infrastructure, including power grids, financial networks, transportation systems, and communications, creating disruption that brings conflict consequences directly to American civilian population rather than confining damage to distant Middle East theater. And Iranian regime survival despite strikes followed by reconstitution of nuclear program with great power support proves military action achieved only temporary setback rather than permanent solution, vindicating Iranian strategy of resistance while demonstrating limits of American power in multipolar world, where Beijing and Moscow protect adversaries Washington determines should be defeated. Leave Iran now warnings acknowledge these risks while indicating Western governments have concluded Trump will proceed despite potential consequences because domestic political imperatives, Israeli pressure, intelligence assessments about nuclear timeline, and President's personal inclination toward decisive action outweigh cautionary analysis about escalation dangers, economic costs, and strategic uncertainties. Evacuation orders issued 2 to 3 days before anticipated strikes give civilians maximum time to depart while maintaining operational security by not revealing exact timing that would allow Iranian forces to optimize defensive preparations or pre-position retaliatory capabilities for maximum effect. Commercial flights still operating from Tehran Imam Khomeini International Airport provide evacuation routes, but warnings explicitly state this access could end suddenly once military action begins, as Iran closes airspace, airlines cancel service, and airports become potential targets if Iran uses civilian facilities for military purposes, as occurred during previous conflicts. Land borders with Iraq, Turkey, Armenia, Azerbaijan, Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, and Pakistan provide alternative exit routes. Though warnings note these could close or become dangerous as conflict escalates with Iranian security forces preventing departures or neighboring countries restricting entry to manage refugee flows. Embassy coordination includes establishing communication channels for citizens to register locations and receive emergency notifications, pre-positioning evacuation assets in neighboring countries for rapid response if Americans become stranded, and maintaining minimal diplomatic presence for consular services while majority of staff depart, reducing vulnerability to hostage scenarios that Iran might employ as leverage against American military operations. Diego Garcia B-2 preparations prove Trump's operational choice favors stealth bombing campaign over carrier-based strikes as primary method for achieving comprehensive destruction of Iranian nuclear program. Two B-2 Spirit bombers forward deployed to Diego Garcia can each carry 8,500-pound GBU-38 JDAM precision-guided bombs, or 16 2,000-pound GBU-31 JDAMs, or two 30,000-pound GBU-57 Massive Ordnance Penetrators, providing flexible weapons, loads optimized for different target types from surface facilities to hardened bunkers. Stealth characteristics reduce Iranian air defense effectiveness because S-400 and domestic Bavar 373 systems have difficulty detecting and tracking B-2 radar cross-section at ranges sufficient for effective engagement, allowing bombers to penetrate deep into Iranian airspace, deliver weapons on target, and egress before defenses can respond effectively. This is critical advantage over carrier-based F-A-18 and F-35C fighters that, while stealthier than legacy platforms, still present larger radar signatures and require supporting tankers, electronic warfare aircraft, and defense suppression missions that create complex air operations vulnerable to disruption. B-2 missions launching from Diego Garcia fly approximately 12 to 14-hour round trips, including transit to Iranian airspace, time over target for multiple weapons release, and return to base, requiring crew endurance, but eliminating need for regional basing that would expose tankers and support aircraft to Iranian retaliation. Strike package might include 6 to 8 B-2 sorties hitting multiple facilities simultaneously with follow-on missions over subsequent days, striking surviving targets identified through bomb damage assessment conducted by reconnaissance satellites and drones, maintaining persistent surveillance. Targets include Natanz fuel enrichment plant, buried underground, requiring massive ordnance penetrators; Fordow fuel enrichment plant, deeper underground, demanding multiple penetrator hits; Isfahan uranium conversion facility housing chemical processing for reactor fuel; Arak heavy water reactor providing plutonium path to weapons, plus missile production facilities, Revolutionary Guard command centers, naval bases housing fast attack boats, and air defense sites protecting strategic locations. Comprehensive target list could require 50 to 100 strike sorties over 2 to 3 week campaign destroying Iranian nuclear infrastructure beyond near-term reconstitution capability, while accepting that long-term program revival remains possible with Russian-Chinese technical assistance that Trump strikes cannot prevent without regime change that military action might not achieve. And timing of leave now warnings coordinated with Trump's Diego Garcia preparations suggest window is narrowing to final hours before go decision, with tonight or tomorrow morning representing most probable launch time frame based on operational factors. Tonight's strikes would begin Wednesday evening U.S. East Coast time, which is early Thursday morning Iran time, allowing B-2 bombers to reach targets in pre-dawn darkness, providing maximum surprise and optimal conditions for initial stealth penetration before Iranian forces reach full alert status. Tomorrow morning implies Thursday evening East Coast or Friday pre-dawn Iran timing, which also provides darkness cover, plus gives Trump additional 24 hours for any last-minute diplomatic miracle, where Khamenei reverses no-deal position, though intelligence agencies assess this as highly unlikely given Supreme Leader's public commitment to rejecting terms Trump demands. Either timing aligns with Israeli security sources' earlier warning that joint U.S.-Israel strike could begin within 24 to 48 hours, with that window now closing as evacuation orders issued, Diego Garcia mentioned, and Khamenei's rejection confirmed. Weather over Iran is factor where cloud cover affects precision-guided munitions effectiveness and intelligence collection capabilities, with clear skies preferred for optimal strike conditions, though B-2's GPS-guided weapons can hit targets regardless of visibility conditions, affecting laser-guided munitions more dependent on clear line of sight. Diplomatic calendar shows no major international events in next 72 hours that would politically constrain Trump, providing clear schedule for military action without disrupting G7 meetings, UN sessions, or other multilateral forums where timing might create additional complications. And domestic American politics, with Congress attempting war powers vote next week, means Trump has incentive to act before legislative constraints potentially reduce his freedom to operate, suggesting strike decision comes before House vote that might require congressional authorization, eliminating president's ability to proceed unilaterally under executive war powers that currently allow limited duration military operations without explicit legislative approval. Russia's final warning through Foreign Minister Lavrov that strikes would be playing with fire reveals Moscow's assessment that weekend military action creates escalation dynamics leading toward great power confrontation that nuclear weapon states should avoid at all costs. Playing with fire means triggering cascade escalation, where initial American strikes produce Iranian retaliation hitting American forces, American response intensifies targeting Iranian regime leadership, Iranian proxies attack American facilities globally, American strikes expand to Syria, hitting Iranian positions, and potentially Russian advisors creating casualties that force Putin to respond. Russian cyber attacks hit American homeland infrastructure. American cyber countermeasures target Russian networks. And accumulated escalation produces direct kinetic engagement between nuclear powers that neither wanted initially, but neither can back down from once crisis momentum overwhelms rational decision-making. Lavrov warning is Russia's attempt to deter Trump through explicit communication about these escalation risks. But warning also reveals Russian assessment that deterrence has failed because Trump has decided to proceed regardless of Moscow's objections and threats. Russia's policy response includes continued intelligence sharing with Iran, providing real-time warning about American strike packages, cyber warfare operations targeting American military communications, and potentially homeland critical infrastructure, diplomatic actions at UN Security Council condemning American aggression and calling for sanctions against Washington that China will support, economic retaliation potentially including energy supply disruptions to European allies that hurt American coalition politically, and depending on casualties if Russian personnel operating S-400 systems in Iran get killed by American bombs, direct military retaliation through mechanisms maintaining plausible deniability like cyber attacks or proxy actions, rather than open warfare that risks nuclear escalation neither superpower wants, despite confrontational rhetoric used for strategic communication purposes. China's parallel position backing Iranian rejection and warning against American unilateralism reveals Beijing's calculation that Iranian regime survival serves Chinese interests more than accommodating American military demonstration serves need for stable relationship with Washington. China imports oil from Iran, paying in yuan, circumventing dollar-based sanctions, making regime stability important for energy security. China's Belt and Road investments in Iranian infrastructure represent billions in capital threatened by American strikes. And strategically, China benefits from any challenge to American hegemony that demonstrates limits of Washington's ability to impose outcomes when Beijing objects, making Iranian resistance valuable precedent for Taiwan's scenario where Chinese calculation is that American military superiority insufficient to guarantee victory when peer competitor provides backing. So, China's response to American strikes includes economic retaliation, potentially targeting American companies doing business in China or restricting rare earth exports needed for military systems, diplomatic isolation working with Russia and developing nations to condemn American action and prevent UN authorization, cyber operations supporting Iranian electronic warfare against American networks, intelligence sharing providing Iran with targeting data about American force dispositions, and financial support helping Iranian regime survive economic costs of conflict through yuan-based trade and investment that circumvents Western sanctions regime dependent on dollar-denominated international commerce. Combined Russia-China response creates strategic depth for Iranian resistance that American military planners must account for when assessing whether tactical success destroying nuclear facilities produces strategic victory or a Pyrrhic outcome where costs and economic damage, diplomatic isolation, and alliance tension exceed benefits of temporary Iranian capability degradation that great power support allows reconstituting over subsequent years. The convergence is complete and collision is imminent. Leave Iran now warns civilians to evacuate before Diego Garcia bombers strike. Khamenei says no deal closing diplomatic option and justifying military response Trump prepared. B-2s ready at Diego Garcia, waiting only presidential authorization. Intelligence assessments indicate tonight or tomorrow as probable launch window. Evacuation warnings from multiple governments signal imminent action based on shared intelligence about Trump's decision. And all warning signs flash red. Commercial flights still available but may stop suddenly. Borders open but could close on short notice. Embassies evacuating non-essential staff. Military forces positioned at maximum readiness. Russia-China issuing final warnings. Israel bracing for retaliation. Oil markets pricing conflict premium. Leave now means leave immediately before decision that could come any hour transforms travel advisory into active war zone where extraction becomes impossible and survival depends on shelter rather than flight. Khamenei's rejection was final diplomatic word-ending negotiations, an activating military option Trump spent weeks positioning to execute. Diego Garcia reveals specific platform confirming stealth bombing campaign rather than carrier strikes as operational concept. And warning combined with rejection, combined with readiness, equals imminent action where tonight's darkness could illuminate with explosions as 30,000-pound bunker busters penetrate Natanz and Fordow beginning campaign that decades of diplomacy failed to prevent and that could reshape Middle East, global economy, and great power relations through consequences that transform regional conflict into inflection point, determining whether American military supremacy retains deterrent value or whether multipolar resistance backed by peer competitors has successfully challenged Washington's ability to impose outcomes through unilateral force. The warning is urgent. The deadline is immediate. And anyone remaining in Iran when decision executes has been warned to leave now, while escape remains possible before bombs fall and exits close.